Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be back.
Are you ready to learn some stuff today? We're going to be doing what we do best here, taking a ton of information and giving you all the best parts.
Yeah, all killer, no filler, right?
Exactly. We're going to get right to the good stuff.
You'll need to read it all yourself.
Today, we're diving into the world of Australian podcasts.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, so we'll be breaking down the Podpoll 24 study from Deadset Studios and Insightfully.
Oh, cool.
Now, Deadset Studios is actually Australia's biggest podcast production house, if you didn't know that.
Didn't know that.
It's run by Kellie Riordan.
Okay.
She's a strategist. She's the leading strategist in the podcast world.
I see.
And she was even the former head of podcasts at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So, big name.
Wow, impressive.
And Insightfully is a market and opinion research agency, and they're amazing at what they do.
Sounds like it.
And that's run by Leanne White.
Okay.
So big thanks to both of them for this amazing study.
Yeah, thanks to both of them for all their work on this. It's super interesting stuff.
So let's dive into it.
Let's go.
So first of all, who's actually listening to all these podcasts?
Yeah, who are these people?
Well, it turns out 39% of Australians, that's 8.2 million people, are tuning in monthly.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is.
And what's even crazier is that 2 million of them are listening every single day.
Yeah, they're not just casually listening every once in a while. This is like part of their routine now.
Yeah, for sure.
Their podcasts aren't this little niche thing anymore.
Right.
It's mainstream now.
Yeah.
So who are these people?
Yeah, who are these podcast lovers?
The study broke it down, the demographics, and it turns out 25 to 34-year-olds are the biggest podcast fans.
That makes sense. They're digital natives.
60% of them are tuning in regularly.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just millennials either.
Oh, really?
I mean, they're big on it.
Yeah.
But Gen Z, 50% of them.
Okay.
And even 38% of Gen Xers are regular podcast listeners.
Wow. So it's like across the board.
Yeah, they're catching on with everybody.
Yeah.
But here's something I found really interesting.
What's that?
When they were asking Gen X and millennials, what was stopping them from listening to more podcasts?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them said that they just didn't have the time.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
And that to me is like a super interesting takeaway.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it means that there's a demand for shorter podcasts.
Right. You need something that you can listen to, like, on a quick car ride.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like if you're doing the dishes, something that doesn't take hours and hours.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about my own listening habits. Do you ever go through like scrolling through podcasts and you're just like, man, I wish this was shorter.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I wish I could fit this in.
Especially those like multi-part series that are like,
yeah,
they could have condensed this down to like a 2-parter, but it's like 12 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I don't have time for that. And I think a lot of people are in that boat now. Like, especially Gen X and millennials, they're busy.
They're working. They've got families. They've got stuff going on.
Yeah. And so I think if you're a podcast creator,
right,
and you can make that like really concise, interesting content, you might find a whole new audience of people who they don't have a lot of time, but they want something interesting to listen to.
Right, right. Something to keep them entertained while they're, doing their daily tasks.
Exactly. And I think that's just like a big takeaway from all of this is that, people are busy. They want things to be shorter. And podcasts need to adapt to that.
Absolutely. The creators need to adapt to what the listeners want.
So that's kind of the first part of it. Who's listening?
Yeah, the who.
And now we need to get into, what are they listening to?
Yeah, what are these millions of Australians tuning in for?
Let's unpack that next.
Okay, let's get into the content.
So what are the most popular genres in Australia?
Yeah, what are people listening to down under?
Well, it seems Aussies really like drama and comedy because those are at the top.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Crime and comedy.
Yeah. Who doesn't love a good crime story or a good laugh?
Exactly.
It's a classic combo.
But there's a twist this year.
Oh, really? What is it?
News and current affairs has jumped up into the top 3.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It's a pretty big change from last year.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think with everything going on in the world, people want something to, break it down for them.
Right. You want to know what's going on and you want to know what it means for you.
And they want different perspectives. You don't just want to hear one side of the story.
Right. You want the whole picture.
Exactly. And I think that's why news and current affairs has gotten so popular.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're providing that,
right,
that deeper dive, I guess.
the analysis, the different viewpoints.
Yeah. And it's not just, reading the headlines. It's like really getting into it.
Yeah, going deeper.
And then here's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we talked about the popular genres, right?
Yeah, crime, comedy, news, and current affairs.
But the study also looked at what genres people wanted more of.
Oh, really? Like, where do they feel like there's a gap?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what did they find?
Well, listeners are saying that they want more lifestyle content. Okay, that's pretty broad. What does that even mean?
Yeah, it is broad, and I guess it could mean a lot of things, like health and well-being, history, fashion, and beauty.
Okay, so like the stuff that's relevant to their everyday lives.
Yeah, exactly. And
that makes sense.
I don't know, I'm thinking about it. I'm like,
yeah.
Imagine a podcast, like a really good podcast on Australian history.
Right, or like Australian slang. Like a whole deep dive into like all the crazy sayings that Aussies have.
Yeah, or like iconic Australian fashion moments.
Oh, that would be fun. I don't know. I feel like there's so much potential there.
Yeah, there's definitely a gap to fill.
Yeah, and this is where you come in, the listener.
Right. Like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, what are you interested in?
Maybe there's a podcast out there just waiting to be made that's perfect for you.
Exactly. And it's a really exciting time to be both a listener and a creator because there's so much untapped potential.
Right. There's so much room to grow and experiment.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to create the next big Aussie podcast hit.
Yeah, maybe you're listening to this right now and you've got the next $1 million podcast idea brewing in your head.
But, before we get ahead of ourselves and all the amazing stuff, we need to talk about something that's been making waves in the podcasting world.
Uh-oh, what's that?
AI.
Ah, yes. The elephant, or maybe the algorithm in the room.
Yeah, things are going to get a little bit more serious now.
Okay, I'm ready.
The study found that 83% of Australian listeners are concerned about AI and podcasts.
Wow, 83%. That's a huge majority.
It is a huge majority. And their biggest concern is accuracy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like you're listening to a podcast to learn something or to be entertained. You want to know it's right.
Right. You're putting your trust in the creator to give you accurate information.
Exactly. And it's not just a small group that's worried about this. 90% of listeners think that the government and the podcast industry need to do more to make sure AI content is true.
Wow, 90%. That's a really strong statement.
Yeah, listeners are definitely aware of the problems with AI and they want something done about it.
Yeah, they're not just sitting back and letting it happen.
And it just raises some questions like, how do we balance the possibilities of AI with the need for good information?
Right. How do we make sure that AI is being used responsibly and ethically?
Exactly. It's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.
For sure.
And I think it's a good time to, as a listener, think about what role you want to play in all of this.
Right. Like, how can you be a more informed and careful listener in this age of AI?
Exactly. It's something to think about.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the, the heavier side of things.
Right. The AI question.
But we're not done with all the positive stuff yet.
Okay, good. I like positive stuff.
Because the Podpoll 24 study actually found some really encouraging things about podcasts.
Oh, good. Like what?
Well, 54% of listeners have recommended a podcast to someone else.
Wow, that's pretty high.
It is. And to me, that really shows how much these shows can affect people.
Right. It's not just passive listening. It's something that people are engaging with and sharing with their friends and family.
Yeah, it's like a book club for your ears.
I like that. A book club for your ears.
But it's not just recommendations. The study also found that podcasts can really get people to do things.
Oh, really? Like what kind of things?
Like half of the listeners have searched online for a topic after hearing it on a podcast.
Wow, so it's making them curious and want to learn more.
Yeah, and 14% have actually bought something because of a podcast.
That's amazing. It shows that podcasts have real power to influence people's decisions.
Yeah, and it's, think about it. Have you ever listened to a podcast and it made you want to learn more, do something different, or even buy something new?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It's pretty amazing how much audio can affect us.
Yeah, it really is.
And then there's all the potential for brands with podcasts.
Right, like branded podcasts are becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, 49% of listeners are open to hearing from brands in podcasts.
Okay.
And there are a few genres where people are really interested in that kind of content.
Like what kind of genres?
I think it was like business and finance.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And maybe even some lifestyle stuff.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think people are realizing that podcasts are a good way for brands to connect with them.
Yeah, it's more personal and engaging than traditional advertising.
Exactly. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more brands getting into podcasts.
It's a smart move.
All right. So we've talked about who's listening and what they're listening to.
The what and the who.
Now let's talk about, their actual listening habits.
Okay, like when and where are people tuning in?
Yeah, so the study found that most Australians listen to about 2 to 4 episodes a week.
Okay, that's a decent amount.
And a lot of them are listening during their commute or while they're doing something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the perfect way to multitask.
It's like the perfect companion for those moments in your day when you're just,
yeah,
doing something else.
Right, like when you're walking the dog or folding laundry.
Exactly. And it seems like people really like episodes that are between 15 and 60 minutes long.
Okay, so like not too short, not too long?
Yeah, and the study found that 80% of listeners finish most of the episodes they start.
Wow, that's a really high completion rate.
It is. It really shows you how good the content is,
Right, people are actually sticking around and listening to the whole thing.
Yeah, so think about your own listening habits for a second. When and where do you usually listen to podcasts?
Yeah, like what's your ideal podcast listening situation?
Is it on your morning run?
Yeah, or maybe while you're cooking dinner.
It's fascinating how podcasts fit into our lives.
Yeah, it's become part of our routine.
They become part of our routine, and they make those, those in-between moments a little bit better.
Absolutely. It's like having a friend in your ear keeping you company.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes podcasts so special.
Yeah, it's a unique and powerful medium.
And I think the Australian podcast scene is just going to get bigger and better from here.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be a podcast fan.
So that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into Australian podcasts.
Okay, so we've covered who's listening, what they're listening to, and their listening habits.
Yep. And next time we're going to dive even deeper into the world of Australian podcasts.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
So make sure you tune in next time for part 2 of our deep dive into Australian podcasts.
We'll see you then.
Don't miss it.
Okay, we'll be here. Yeah, it really is amazing how well podcasts can fit into our everyday lives.
Totally.
And you know what else is interesting? So remember how on the radio you've got prime time?
Right.
It turns out that podcasts have their own prime time too.
Really? I never thought about that.
Yeah, it's true.
Like what, mornings and afternoons?
Yeah, pretty much.
I wouldn't have guessed.
Well, according to this study, peak listening times are between 5 and 9 a.m.
Okay.
And then again from 3 to 6 p.m.
So beginning and end of the workday.
Exactly.
But that makes sense, I guess.
37% of listeners in the morning.
Okay.
And then 42% in the afternoon.
Wow.
So, people are either starting their day with a podcast or they're finishing their day.
Right. But wouldn't that be different depending on,
What do you mean?
people's jobs and lifestyles?
Oh, yeah.
If you don't work a 9 to 5.
Exactly.
Your listening habits could be different.
For sure. But the study found that people who are 25 to 34, full-time workers, and people who make a bit more money,
Okay.
they're all more likely to listen in the morning.
I guess that's when they have time.
Maybe they're listening to the news or something.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the day.
That's what I would do.
Right.
Okay, so we talked about who's listening, what they're listening to.
And when they're listening.
Now we need to talk about why.
It's a big question.
Why are Australians so obsessed with podcasts?
What is it about this audio format that people just love?
Well, entertainment's at the top.
Of course.
73% said they listen to podcasts to be entertained.
Makes sense.
64% to relax.
Okay.
So it's a way to, escape.
Right, just tune out the world for a bit.
Yeah, de-stress.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Me too.
Sometimes you just need to zone out and listen to something fun.
But it's not just about tuning out.
Right.
59% want to stay informed.
Okay, so they're listening to news and current affairs.
Yeah.
Which we talked about earlier. It's like a deeper dive than just reading the headlines. Yeah. And you get different opinions.
You get the analysis.
Which is important.
For sure.
And then there's also, learning.
Oh, yeah. Podcasts are a great way to learn new things.
45% said they use podcasts for personal growth.
It's like having a personal tutor in your pocket.
I love that.
Right.
It's true. You can learn about anything.
Anything and everything.
And the best part is you could do it while doing other stuff.
Yeah. That's the beauty of podcasts. You can multitask.
You can be working out, cleaning.
Driving.
Yeah, and still learning.
The study actually found that a lot of Australians listen while they're relaxing, driving, exercising, even doing chores.
So they're just making the most of their time.
Exactly. Time is precious.
It is.
And podcasts let you use that time wisely.
I think that's why they've gotten so popular.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of what's going on in people's lives.
Yeah.
The study also looked at what issues are on Australians' minds.
Oh, that's interesting. What did they find?
The biggest one was the cost of living.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for everyone these days.
It was the most pressing concern for 70% of listeners.
Wow, 70%. That's huge.
I know, and it just shows you how much it's affecting people.
Yeah, it's a real concern.
And then climate change was second.
Okay.
23%, so that was a big issue for them.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Climate change is a global issue.
And it's clearly on people's minds.
Absolutely.
So it's like, these big problems are weighing on people.
Right, and maybe that's why they're turning to podcasts.
To try to understand it better.
Exactly, to get more information, to hear different perspectives.
And maybe even find solutions.
Podcasts have the power to do that, to not just entertain, but to educate and inspire.
Yeah, and I think that's really important.
For sure.
Okay, last thing I want to talk about.
What's that?
Recommendations.
Oh, yeah. Word of mouth is huge for podcasts.
The study found that the most common way people find new podcasts is through recommendations.
That's not surprising.
31% said they hear about new shows from friends and family.
It makes sense. You trust your friends and family.
Yeah, and you're more likely to try something if someone you know recommends it.
Absolutely.
So if you're a podcaster,
right,
you need to build a community.
Yeah, you need to create content that people will love and want to share.
Because that's how you grow your audience.
Word of mouth is the best marketing.
And it makes me think about all the podcasts I've discovered. Because someone told me about them.
Me too. Some of my favorite podcasts were recommendations from friends.
It just shows you how connected the podcasting world is.
Yeah, it's a real community.
And I think that's what makes it so special.
It's a shared love of audio and storytelling.
And it's only getting bigger and better.
I can't wait to see what the future holds for Australian podcasts.
Me too. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it really is a great community, and I think it's only going to get even better from here.
Me too. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, there's so much potential.
Okay, so we've talked about pretty much everything, right? We talked about who's listening, what they're listening to, how podcasts can make people do stuff, even when they're listening.
Oh, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I want to mention.
Okay, what is it?
This whole thing about AI and the demand for more content, I think it shows this
this tension.
Yeah, this tension in the podcasting world.
Right, like, we want more, but we're also worried about where it's coming from.
Yeah, and who's making it.
Yeah.
It's like, listeners want more podcasts, more genres, you know.
Right, more niche topics, more diverse voices.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're worried about AI.
About the accuracy, about whether it's even real.
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
It is. It's like a double-edged sword.
And it makes me wonder, what does this mean for us as listeners?
What do you mean?
Like, what's our responsibility in all of this?
That's a good question.
Because we can't just sit back and let AI take over.
Right. We need to be mindful.
We need to be careful about what we're listening to.
We need to be critical thinkers.
Exactly. We can't just believe everything we hear.
Especially when it's so easy to make things sound real.
Yeah, with AI, anyone can sound like an expert.
Exactly. So it's on us to do our research.
To question things.
To make sure the information we're getting is actually true.
And I think podcast creators have a responsibility too.
Oh, absolutely.
To be transparent.
To be accurate.
To prioritize quality over quantity.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about trust. If you lose the trust of your audience, you've lost everything.
And that's true for any kind of content, not just podcasts.
Yeah. Trust is the foundation of any relationship.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Australian podcasts.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've learned a lot.
I want to leave you with this. Be curious, keep exploring, but also be critical.
Yeah, don't be afraid to question things.
And most importantly, have fun.
Because there are so many amazing podcasts out there.
There are, you just have to find them.
So keep listening, keep learning, and keep sharing the podcasts you love.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, happy listening.